Most of today's chironomid pupa patterns are almost exclusively tied using synthetic materials. The Red Back Pheasant is a blend of traditional materials and today's modern synthetics. It has become one of my favorite chironomid pupa patterns. Here are the materials you will need to tie this productive pattern. So let's tie the Red Back Pheasant. To the jaws of my Regal, I've placed a number 10 Mustad C49S curved scud hook. I've also slid on a 7/64 gold bead. It's a tapered bead, and I put the narrow end of the bead towards the hook eye. I'm going to pull the bead back out of the way. I'm going to attach my black tying thread with a minimum of wraps to reduce bulk. Trim away the excess. For the gill material, I'm going to use some of the new Spirit River UV2 sparkle yarn in white. For this number 10, I can use the entire width of the sparkle yarn. If you're using smaller flies, you'd have to probably break this in half or a third to match the size of the hook. We're just going to place a couple of loose wraps right at the hook eye, one in front to help cock the gills up so it's easy to tie in the hook, and then I'm going to advance the tying thread back, and I'm pulling on the sparkle yarn to help reduce bulk. And when I've gone past where I envision the bead is going to slide over, I'm going to come in with my scissors, trim this on an angle, get all of the bits off here, and then we're just going to cover this up and then whip finish. We want to do this with a minimum of wraps to keep everything nice and slim so the bead can slide over top. So a 2 or 3 turn whip finish should be fine. Disengage. And then we're just going to take our bead, and if we've done things correctly as we have here, the bead should slide over nicely. And you can see that the tie-off area of the yarn is behind the bead, so I have the opportunity when I reattach my thread, which I'm doing now, to cover that up. And that also helps build up the slight body taper we want just at the rear of the thorax. So we're going to take our tying thread down the shank, cover that shank with tying thread for a good firm base. See how the thread's about 45-degree angle? That's about as far as I like to go. Then I'm just going to quickly advance my thread forward and open turns right back up to the hook eye. For the ribbing material, we're going to use some UTC wire in small gold. And we're going to tie that in along the near side of the hook. So I'm going to take the wire and stab it into the bead slightly to help position it, and then just secure it all the way down the side of the hook shank. So I'm pulling on it with a bit of tension and lifting it to make sure it stays on the side of the hook and doesn't rotate around out of position. And then we're just going to take the wire and secure that in our materials clip. For the body, we're going to use some pheasant tail that's been dyed a claret or burgundy or maroon, depending on the manufacturer. And we're just going to take, not too many, remember tying chironomids, we want nice and slender, so I've taken about 5 or 6 fibers in this case, stood them perpendicular to the stem, and just removed them. I'm going to moisten them to keep them all together, and then I'm going to tie them in by the tips. So I'm going to nip the very tip of the tips off, if that makes sense, so they're square. And we're just going to tie them in with a minimum of wraps, and then advance our tying thread forward to the hook eye. Or sorry, up to the rear of the bead. And then to add a little bit of reinforcement to this fly, I'm just going to give a thin coat of super glue, and then we're going to wind the pheasant tail forward. Now, most materials you wind on the fly, you wind over the top away from you. We're going to do this counter wrapped, if you will. We're going to wind them over the top coming towards us. So we go around the hook shank and place one wrap right next door to the other and secure the pheasant tail behind the bead when we get there. And the advantage of this too, with the super glue, we're adding reinforcement, and if I accidentally let go of the pheasant tail fibers, which is a possibility up near the end here because we're running out of pheasant tail fibers, so we just carefully use our non-tying hand, if you will, to help hold in position as we wind forward And we come right up to the rear of the bead. Get my hands out of the way in a second here. Couple of wraps, and we've secured our pheasant tail. We're trying to make this body as slim as we can to match the natural chironomid pupa. We don't want fat, obese chironomid pupa here. A few extra turns. And at this point, if you want to trim your gills, you can. You can trim them at the end of the fly, just after you tied them in. I'm just going to do them here because I'm doing some cutting. So I'm just folding the yarn back over the bead and sort of putting my scissor blades right at the rear of the bead and making one snip, and that is the right proportions for your gills. Your gills, you want them to be approximately the length of the bead itself. It's just a good proportion no matter what size of fly you're tying. For the fly's signature shellback, we're going to use some holographic red mylar in medium. For this number 10, if you're tying smaller flies, you'd probably want to keep that proportional. So 12s or 14s, probably a small would be a more appropriate width of mylar to use. And we're just going to tie this in place directly on top of the hook. And leave that little tag sticking up because I'm going to fold that back. This will all be covered up with peacock with the thorax, so don't worry about cleaning it up too much. That thorax process will do that for you. So what we're going to do is take a positioning wrap with the wire by making a half turn, so the wire is hanging straight down. I'm then going to lay my mylar over the pheasant and come around, and this time I'm wrapping. I'm not counter wrapping. I'm wrapping in the standard direction, so over the top, away from you, and I actually apply tension on the downstroke. So I go over the top, and by applying tension on the downstroke, I make sure that the torque of my rib winding does not knock the mylar shellback out of position, because when I pull straight down, the net effect is the pressure on the material is straight down from the top, not rolling away over the side. And then we get up behind the bead, make a couple of securing wraps over top twice, a couple in front, and then I pull and twist to helicopter or break the wire away. And then we're going to trim our shellback to length, so we're going to put our scissor blades right against the butt of the hook and make one snip, and that gives the fly sort of a distinctive red butt that's common to many species of chironomids. The residual hemoglobin from the larval stage collects a lot of times along the body segments of the fly and also at the butt of the pupal skin and gathers there. So that can be a real trigger for fish sometimes. So all we've got left to do is to form the thorax, and for the thorax we're going to use some UV2 peacock from a peacock eye, nice full fibered feather. Tie that in by the tip, a couple of wraps, and basically we're just going to put 3 to 5 wraps of peacock curl pretty well directly behind the bead, just to cover up our thread work, if you will. Your thorax on these chironomids that you're using peacock curl or thread thoraxes, I like to make sure that my thorax does not extend any more than about half the bead width back from behind the bead, if that makes sense. And once we're satisfied with that, we're just going to come in with our scissors, nip that away, and then we're ready to whip finish the fly. So we're going to take a little bit of head cement, apply that, or in this case super glue, place that directly on the tying thread, and use the thread as the medium to carry our adhesive into the base of the fibers. This way we make sure the head cement or the super glue gets right where it needs to be, which is at the base of these peacock curl fibers, and the glue itself doesn't get into the fibers and mat them all down. And all it's left to do is a 3 to 5 turn whip finish, and your red back pheasant is complete. So there you have it, the red back pheasant, one of my favorite chironomid patterns, a simple tie, a nice blend of natural and synthetic materials. Be sure to add a few to your fly box. For more information on fly fishing, and stillwater fly fishing in particular, please visit my website at flycraftangling.com. Here you'll find lots of information, including fly fishing tips, fly patterns, articles, dates on my seminars and schools, along with links to my blog and mine and Brian Chan's online stillwater fly fishing shop. You can also visit our store directly at stillwaterflyfishingstore.com. Please join the conversation on my Facebook page or follow me on Twitter. Thanks for watching, and please take the time to watch my other tying videos as well.